And then obviously, because it's a theme that you could talk about quite a lot, your trans journey, at what point did you start to feel yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I grew up so born in the mid-60s. I there was no language in those
Hmm.
days. You know,
Hmm.
homosexuality was partially discriminated in 1967. There was no internet. There was two channels on telly, and you had to tweak the dial to change the channel. My parents weren't very progressive. They weren't they weren't hippies or rock and rollers or punks or anything. They were kind of just your average family at the time. So there was no gay, lesbian, radical
Hmm.
type thoughts. Music, if it wasn't classical, was frowned upon in our family. So, yeah, we're very straight laced, very putting bass and haircut. So there was no language around being trans.
Hmm.
I didn't know what it was, but I did appreciate that there was something in my head that didn't align. I always felt like I was in the wrong queue, standing with the wrong people,
From what age did
not
you
doing the
kind
things I
of,
wanted to.
was that from teenager or
It's
before? Or?
it's hard to put your finger on it. I'm very conscious that I don't want to imprint false memories and create false
Yeah,
associations, and there's a danger of that. But I would say that around the age of five, six or seven, seven or
okay.
eight, in that sort of primary school, as it was in the early 70s.
Hmm.
I remember trying skirts up in the dressing up box. I remember wanting to play one of the ugly sisters in a pantomime. Um, I definitely had those thoughts. I definitely had those feelings. I was a cub and then a scout, and I always felt like I wanted to be a brownie and a guide. So yeah, it was really difficult. You know, you're 7 or 8, 10 years old, whatever,
Hmm.
however old I was. You've got these kind of random thoughts in your head. There's no outlet. There's no description. There's nobody having these conversations.
Hmm.
It's not a conversation you can bring up with your parents or anything. It was just, it is what it is. You just get on and be who you are. You know, you live up to the programming you're given, and these thoughts didn't go away. They kind of grew throughout my pre-teens, teens, and post-teen years. Manifest themselves in various ways. Uh, as I often say to people, you know, if you're a little girl and you're caught trying your mum's shoes on, your mum's makeup and your mum's jewelry, it's really cute. Yeah, may get a bit of a sort of a stern talking to. That's, you know, if you're ruining expensive makeup, but it's kind of cute. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, is that sweet? But I was very conscious about the fact, as a little boy at the time, had I been discovered, it would have been not only wrong to be doing what I was doing, but wrong from a it wasn't a boy thing.
Especially in the 70s. You know, it's
Yeah,
I-
especially in the 70s. Yeah.
and then so like how as you kind of went through, did you go to university? I'm trying to go through almost the careering as well because you ended up
No,
into
I
IT.
left. School at the age of 16 and a half, thereabouts in 1981, just about when Charles and Diana got married, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they got married in the July, and I left school around about a week before that. And no, I joined the RAF. I was an
Wow.
avionics apprentice. I was a communications engineer apprentice studying avionics, radar, and radio communications. So that was my early career in electronics, all born out of a hobby that I thought I had. All stemmed from a Ladybird book on how to build a transistor radio, which my parents bought me. So that became my career of choice from a Ladybird book. I look back on it, and I don't think it was really my career choice, but it was kind of one of those, didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. All my friends at the time signed on for college, went to
Hmm.
university.
Hmm.
But neither of my parents had been to university, so it was not a natural push. I was not naturally pushed into an academic sort of future. So my father was an artificer in the Navy. He was a gunnery artificer, so he went through an apprenticeship program in the Navy.
Hmm.
So I think it was kind of, my influence was around going into an apprenticeship, either in commerce, defence industry, or one of the armed forces. Didn't fancy the Navy at the time. Lots of talk about going on submarines. I didn't fancy that, and so yeah, I got sipped into the RAF. Realised after about 2.5, 3 years, that I really didn't understand electronics. It wasn't my forte. I wasn't really cut out for the kind of service life either. It just didn't resonate. So I left. I left after 3 years. So I did my training, left. Throughout that time, though, it was kind of instilled in us. You get obviously the military discipline. You're told about drugs are bad, being gay is bad. This is early 80s. So we're all very conscious about the fact that it was illegal to be gay, illegal to be not straight, for whatever that meant in those days. I guess you could call being trans, or gender confused, as being not straight, whatever that meant in those days. So yeah, very conscious about the fact that you had to perform in a very vanilla, very traditional way. And so yeah, I repressed a lot of my gender identity. I remember going on exercise, and the advice was to wear tights under your combats as another layer of warmth. But I had a different association with tights. So I was probably the only person out on exercise not wearing tights, because for me it just felt wrong. It was like, that was something that meant something to me, and all my colleagues at the time were laughing and joking about them, but to me it meant it had a far more deeper meaning. And seeing people taking the mickey out of something that I found resonated with me was quite strange. So yeah, I've got memories like that reinforce the fact that there was definitely a conflict in my head about how I felt about things.
And then when you said that you transitioned circa 5 years ago, when you set up your own business, left your former career, but like, how was that kind of, at what point was there a single point where you thought, actually, I want to transition? I'm just trying to, because what I'm trying to do is almost, if someone who might watch this might be gender confused, or, whatever that they choose to term it, it's that balance of just, I'm sure if they could hear someone else's experience, it will help them almost go through it themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I left the RAF at the age of 19, back on Civvy Street. I met my wife to be in mid-80s. We got married in 87. At that time, it wasn't wrong for me. I wasn't fighting anything. I wasn't having a battle with myself. So that my gender confusion was just something inside. Again, there's still no language, still no internet, still no commonality. Section 28, I think it was 1988, was it Thatcher, something like that. So yeah, I was able to have I still have a successful marriage. Developed a successful marriage. Have two adult children now, 130, 127. So yeah, I formed a very stable traditional family. Again, I wasn't overly queer or trans or gay or anything like that. I was just a typical. People would describe me as a blokey bloke. I was drank too much, partied too much, hang around with friends too much. Started my own IT company when I was in my early 30s, having worked for a couple of banks. Built that company up over several iterations, over 15 to 20 years. But it was probably when I got to my mid to late 40s where, I don't know what it is. I think it's the kids get older. You've plateaued maybe in some of your life. You're not on the acquisition trail. You've kind of got what you want. You've got stuff. And maybe you take your foot off the pedal slightly. And then once you start maybe coasting in life at that age, you start to look around, start to realise what life's all around. And I think it just came to the forefront of my mind in my mid to late 40s. I shared this inner secret that I had with my wife in probably 2012. So how long was it? That's 10 years ago, give or take.
Wow.
10 years ago this year.
I can't believe that's 10 years ago.
I know, it sounds scary, doesn't it? 2012, 10 years ago.
I remember going to the Olympics. I still can't believe it's 10 years ago. You just said it, just twigged. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Well, the Olympics, we often joke, my wife and I often joke about the Olympics. It's kind of I think from the beginning of the Olympics to the end of the Paralympics is when we were having these big challenging discussions as a married couple, and out of those discussions allowed me to share my transiness, for want of a better word. I didn't have a name for it. It wasn't real. It was kind of a hobby. It was something I did in private. I didn't go out. I didn't meet anybody. I didn't have a life as such.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't real in those terms. It's something completely sort of private, something that was my own. But I think what happened was once I sat down and talked to my wife about it, we kind of didn't. It wasn't a threat at the time to our marriage because it was just something I was doing in the background. It was my wife was able to see it as something that was just part of me, but not a threat. But I think having talked about it openly, it gave it a life.
Mm-hmm.
It gave it oxygen.
Made it real.
It started to it was instead of being in a dark secret inside my head, it was now something I could talk about and share with somebody else. I tried many times to put it back in the box.
Mm-hmm.
I went feral. I grew a pretty major beard.
This is even after 2012.
2014.
Okay, so
This is
yeah.
in 2014.
Yeah.
So I grew a pretty kind of
Mm-hmm.
Bluto, Popeye and Bluto, a real big thick brown beard, quite bear-like. People look like a bear at times. So yeah, but then I think it's mid 2014, around May. Having looked in the mirror, I thought I'd fixed it, cured myself. I think what it was I think I put it behind me 6 months. I put it behind me, and I was just starting to pack up the drawers full of clothes and everything else I had going on. And rather than put it in a bin liner and throw it away, the act of getting it out and it just suddenly everything came rushing back to me. It was that point there I realised that all I was doing really was just brushing under the carpet, ignoring it. So I shaved my beard off almost that afternoon, and I joined a trans support group run by the Beaumont Society, who are a national charity who've been going for many years. I found their local club, for want of a better way of putting it, support group, and started going to their monthly meetings. And there was two different ones, so I was going twice a month to these groups, and that was mid 2014. I started building a network of friends on Facebook, on social media, on other networks. Gave myself a name, and then again, once you've got a name, once you can describe yourself, people start using your name. People start describing you, and you build friendships, you build relationships. That person, that embryo you created, suddenly has a life. It is no longer something that's in your head, your fantasy, or something you want to unlock. It becomes real. So I think that's what kind of developed in the mid 20s, whatever it is, 2010s.
Yeah.
And in 2016, it got to the point where it was just too big to keep a lid on it. I got to the point where I couldn't keep living this double life. I was developing two personalities, two lives, it's like these two separate entities. I do two groups of friends. I couldn't talk about that. In the trans world, you're very kind of secretive about our other life because you didn't want it to leak out who you were. You didn't want it to cross over. You want to keep these two lives completely separate. And I just found that I was becoming these two people, and I wanted to be one person. I wanted to be one person again. And the more I realised that the one person I wanted to be was my female self. That was the one that became the dominant person in my head. And there's I think it's a Pixar cartoon called Inside Out.
Yeah,
I think it is, where there's these characters in someone's head, and they put these balls down the shoe. And I felt like the angry red blokey character was driving my head, with all the female characters not getting a look in. And I don't know if you remember that film, but they end up sellotaping or tying the male blokey angry guy to the chair, and then all the women start driving the head. That's exactly how I felt. I suddenly felt, wow, I've got rid of that angry blokey character, that person who has been driving my head all this time, shutting the rest of me out. And now I'm in charge of my own head. The people, how I want to be, who I am, is now running my life. And that's how it kind of felt. I think taking hormones reinforced that. The lack of testosterone in my bloodstream affected me, made a huge difference. The estrogen made a huge difference just in the way my outlook on life, my emotional state, etc. So yeah, by mid 2016, I couldn't keep a lid on this. I came out publicly on Facebook. I wouldn't say that I was proud of the way I did it. It was a bit of one of those sort of like drunken cries for help at 2 o'clock in
Yeah.
the morning type things. So I don't regret it. I regret the way I did it,
Hmm.
not what I did.
Hmm.
So I would rather have not been such a drama queen about it, and maybe structured it in a different way. But it had the impact of ripping the sticky plaster off. It was out. I owned it, and that was kind of mid 2016.
Because I imagine that was pretty difficult to do.
Well, I was pretty drunk when I made the post, so
I don't mean
it
just the
wasn't.
one-off post, but it's that balance of where to go through that journey, and especially close family and friends and that kind of thing. But the reason why I think it's important, going back to like the diversity business thing, is that would it be correct to say that you didn't quite feel 100%? You didn't feel yourself for a while, and hence why you said when you were fighting between the two different personalities. Because what I'm trying to say is that, but if we
Yeah,
can create a workplace or an environment or whichever, where actually people do and can be themselves, you can be a lot more happy, I guess.
yeah. Undoubtedly, yes. Creating a workplace where we can be ourselves, we can talk about the challenge we've got. Um, I would say the challenge of a gender transitioning or coming out or being open
Hmm.
for being trans is a different dimension on top of coming out as being, say, gay or lesbian
Okay.
or bi. Because when you come out as gay, it's your sexuality, it's who you want to sleep with, who you want to have relations with, who you want to be romantically engaged with, who you want to spend your life with. That is completely different to suddenly changing your whole persona about how people perceive you. The hopes, dreams, aspirations, the family, how they see you is completely different. I'm not saying coming out as gay is easy either, but what I'm saying is the extra dimension of your gender
Hmm.
transition is a whole extra, yeah, as I say, extra dimension on the whole thing. Um, I think what I found was at the time, no matter how I didn't appreciate what the impact my transition would have on those around me, those closest to me. The challenge was, I think, I at the time fell into the trap of the YOLO trap, where it's your life. You only one your life live it. You only live once.
Hmm.
If people don't accept you, give them two fingers and get on with your life. Find the people that will accept you. I think there's a lot of that advice, if you form of a better way of putting it, you get given. Not just being trans, but a lot of things. But people, it's easy to say, yeah, just do it. I did it, but you don't know how many people actually did it. How many people are just fantasists? How many people have got lived experience? Do they understand your circumstances? So that the challenge is if you want to retain your life, your family, your friends, what you have, then you have to recognise that this has to be a partnership, it has to be a collaboration with the people who are involved in that. I think I started off by believing that my transition was about me, very
Okay.
selfish. It was my transition. Everybody just needed to get the hang of it and accept me. Then we'd all move on. I think we can also use that analogy in the workplace. You transition at work, just accept me so we can get on with it. But I think that what I've learned after 5 or 6 years, the journey I've been on, is that it's around working with people. I can't demand acceptance. I can't demand respect. I can't demand these things of people. What I can do is I can be a good person. I can be the best version of me I can be. And I can be somebody that is respectable. People will respect. I can be somebody that people do want to love. People do value. So I had to be the person that I wanted people to see,
Hmm.
and not make those demands up front. And that's the challenge I found in my early days, that I just wanted people to accept me,
Hmm.
but I forgot that they didn't know me.
But the thing is, to be fair, there's no instruction manual, or maybe there is, but as far as I'm aware, to kind of do this. And it's that balance of where, everyone in hindsight can think about how they would have done things differently 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whichever. But it's, you do the best you can at the time based on what you know, and you're obviously going through a very difficult time.
Completely. And I think what I learnt was I had to course correct as I went. I didn't just set off on this big,
Hmm.
bold plan. I realised very quickly that that plan wouldn't work. Me marching off into the distance was a very lonely type journey. In order to achieve that, I had to, let's say, do it collaboratively, which in some ways is slower. In some ways, you could argue it's more painful. But the end result is that you've brought people with you on that journey, and
Yeah.
the long term benefit is you've maintained those relationships. And something that was in my head for a lot of my life is a brand new bit of information for people. They have to get to know who you are.
Hmm.
As I say, you can't suddenly say I'm now this new person, like me. Even with my friends, even with my work colleagues, you can't just make that demand. You have to allow yourself to go through go through a second puberty. You
Hmm.
have to discover your own identity, your own dress sense, your own personality, your own likes. With all of that, I'd say puberty type thing, dancing, clubbing, drinking, meeting people, socializing. And it's all about trying to develop your personality and
Hmm.
know who you are in the world. And you need to do that. And I think I my only aim was to stop being 22 again and start acting my age. So I was keen to go for not get stuck in the 22 bubble and
Hmm.
being an everlasting teenager. I wanted to go back to being time mid 50s. I wanted to be a mid 50s woman and be happy with being a mid 50s woman. And that's what I realised, that I needed to come out of that teenage bubble
Hmm.
and just get on with my life again. And that was the challenge. And I think when you mentioned about the workplace, I don't think we talk about this challenge enough. We want to transition people. We want to put them on a conveyor belt, check them out at the other end. Um, but like anything in life, there's the heavy lift in the middle.
Hmm.
There's the bit that gets you from A to B. Is that I don't like the word journey or all these kind of words that we use. They're quite they don't really express what's going on. But there is a whole lot of lived experience in there that you have to get to know yourself. You have to like yourself. You have to be
Yeah.
proud of yourself. You have to be comfortable with your own skin. You have to be comfortable in your own gender identity. You have to, we spend all of our lives dealing with gender programming,
Hmm.
with the blue, the pink, boys' toys, girls' toys, expectation for boys, expectation for girls. It's incredibly difficult to unlearn and relearn
Hmm.
that programming,
Do you
and
feel
that's
that?
probably the hardest thing I found.
Do you feel that things have maybe changed? So if you had a 10-year-old now, versus a 10-year-old in the 70s, the way things are treated now, I guess the fact that you have the internet, people can find out about things quicker, find a community, find people to talk to. Do you think it's easier now than it would have been for people 20, 30 years ago?
I, I think the answer is different.
Okay.
Is different. Is it easier being a kid today than it was in the 60s? It's different. It's different. I used to go and play in the park, run around the streets, come back when it got dark.
Hmm.
No phones, no way of communicating. It was a safer world, less cars, etc., etc. Now there's a lot more social media. There's a lot more pressure to conform. Your identity is more open. So if you're in a positive and supportive environment, maybe yes, it is better. But if you're in an environment where you're less secure, you don't have the support network around you,
Got you.
the hurt and the hate can be amplified on social media. So I think there's new challenges, and I don't want to get into any it's better or worse. The
Just
challenges are
different.
significantly different. Yes, we can talk about sexuality now. Yes, we can talk about gender identity, but we look in the papers, the mainstream media, the news, whether Twitter, etc., social media. There's a lot of battles going on
Hmm.
around trans support, trans awareness. We've got massive queues and waiting. People say, "Well, yeah, you can be trans now. Yeah, we accept you." But it's a 4 or 5 year waiting list at the gender identity clinics. Most GPs aren't ready to talk to you. So have we moved on? Yeah, we moved on. What we've done is we created an expectation that society is willing to accept, and then slam the door. We don't provide the support. We don't provide the backing. We get demonized in the press. We get demonized in social media. So in a way, yes, having more recognition and awareness has been fantastic, but it's been met with a backlash and lack of resources to support. So is it better?
Okay.
It sure as heck
fair
is
enough.
different.